The night was supposed to be flawless. A warm glow spread over the horizon as Marcus Ellington's black SUV rolled down the winding driveway toward his mansion. He had just closed a deal that would echo across the financial world, $1 billion acquisition that put his company in the top tier of American business. For Marcus, it was more than just money. It was validation. A kid from Atlanta who grew up with nothing, now the CEO of one of the fastest growing tech empires in the country. Tonight, he wasn't just driving home. He was arriving at the life he had fought for his entire existence. But as the vehicle slowed to approach the tall iron gates of his estate, something happened that Marcus never expected. Red and blue lights flashed across the entrance. Two uniformed security guards stepped out of their booth, holding up their hands like traffic cops. The SUV braked to a halt. The driver rolled down the window, confused. Evening. This is Mr. Ellington's residence. One guard, a bulky man with a shaved head, leaned down, his face stony and dismissive. His voice carried the arrogance of someone who believed he held power. "We're aware, and he's not allowed in." Marcus looked up from the back seat, disbelief flashing in his sharp brown eyes. He thought he must have misheard. "Excuse me?" The guard straightened, puffing out his chest like he'd just delivered some decree. "Orders are clear. You can't enter this property. Turn around." For a long moment, the SUV was frozen in silence. Even the cicadas in the trees seemed to hush. Marcus leaned forward, his expensive watch glinting under the cabin lights. "This is my property. That's my mansion behind those gates. You're telling me I can't go home?" The second guard, younger but just as smug, folded his arms. "We don't care what you say, sir. We've been instructed not to let you in. So unless you want trouble, you'll turn this car around right now." The driver turned back toward Marcus, uncertainty all over his face. "What do you want me to do, sir?" Marcus's jaw tightened. He could feel a storm building in his chest. He had built this life brick by brick, every late night, every sleepless morning, every setback he had clawed through. And now, at the gate of his own home, these men dared to block him as if he were an intruder. He opened the door himself and stepped out. The night air was cool, brushing against his tailored suit. The guard stiffened, suddenly recognizing that man they were denying. But instead of showing respect, their expressions hardened further. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "Open these gates." The older guard smirked. "We don't take orders from you, okay?" And just like that, the night shifted. Marcus wasn't just any man standing in front of them. He was one of the most influential black CEOs in the country, a figure splashed across business magazines, the face of resilience and brilliance. But these guards didn't see that. All they saw was a black man in front of a mansion, and in their eyes, that equation didn't add up. Marcus could feel it, the sting of prejudice wrapped in the guise of authority. It wasn't the first time, but this was different. This was his sanctuary, his home, his family's safety behind those walls. He stepped closer, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel. "One last chance. Open the gate." The younger guard gave a short laugh. "Or what? You'll call the cops." "Good luck with that." Marcus's lips curved into the faintest smile. They had no idea who they were dealing with, because Marcus Ellington wasn't just a CEO. He was the employer of the entire security firm standing between him and his mansion. Every paycheck these men collected flowed from the very empire he commanded. They didn't just block his gate. They had declared war on the hand that fed them. And Marcus never lost wars. As the tension thickened, the mansion lights flickered on in the distance. His wife, Camille, must have seen the SUV halted outside. He imagined her pacing near the window, confusion turning to alarm. Their children were likely upstairs, safe, but wondering why Daddy hadn't come inside yet. Marcus took a deep breath, forcing calm into his tone. "You're standing in front of my gate, denying me access to my own home. You've chosen the wrong night to make this mistake. In the morning, I want you both to think back to this exact moment, 'cause it will be the reason you no longer wear those uniforms." The older guard scoffed. "Big talk. You're not getting past us." And with that, Marcus pulled out his phone. His fingers moved with precision as he dialed a number no ordinary homeowner would have at their disposal. A direct line to the executive office of the security company itself. The call connected. A tired voice answered, clearly startled to be hearing from Marcus at this hour. "This is Marcus Ellington," he said, his voice calm yet razor-sharp. "Your men are blocking me from entering my own property. I suggest you handle this immediately." The silence on the other end was heavy. "Then, Mr. Ellington, I don't understand." "You will." Marcus cut him off. His gaze bored into the guards, who suddenly looked less certain. "You've got 60 seconds to decide if this is the last night your firm works under my contract." The two men exchanged uneasy glances, but pride still clung to their faces, making them hesitate. Marcus ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The storm was already rolling in, and the guards were standing directly in its path. Yet, that charged moment, Marcus couldn't shake one thought. Why? Why would two guards, whose livelihoods depended on him, risk everything to stand against him at his own gate? Who had given them the audacity? And more importantly, what game was being played behind his back? The guards stiffened as headlights appeared in the distance, another vehicle approaching fast. Whoever it was, Marcus knew this confrontation was only just beginning. The air around the mansion gate felt thick with tension, like static before a storm. Samuel could hear the hum of cicadas in the warm evening air, but it was drowned out by the arrogance in the security guard's voice. "I don't care what you say," the guard sneered, leaning one hand on the gate's control box like it was his kingdom. "You don't live here, people like you. You're just here to bother the actual homeowners. Now back up before I call the police." For a moment, Samuel almost laughed. Almost. The absurdity of it, the fact that a man who barely knew his own job description was trying to convince him, the man who built the home, designed every curve of the architecture, and paid every dime of its construction. Instead, he didn't belong. Hear it was surreal. Instead, Samuel stayed quiet. He knew silence often made people more nervous than anger. And this guard, who already looked jittery in the presence of the sleek black Mercedes and its well-dressed owner, started to falter in his performance. "Look, don't make this harder than it has to be," the guard muttered, his tone shifting from smug to defensive. "If you don't leave now, I'll call backup. And trust me, they won't go easy on you." From inside the car, Samuel's assistant, Maya, leaned forward nervously. "Sir," she whispered, "should I just show him the documents, the deed, the I did something?" Samuel raised a hand, still calm. "No, Maya, not yet. Let's see just how far this little performance goes." The truth was, Samuel already had an audience. A couple of neighbors in workout clothes had paused their evening jog at the far end of the road, craning their necks. A delivery van slowed down as its driver watched the standoff. The longer this went on, the more people were seeing the humiliation play out. The wealthy black man being told he didn't belong at his own front gate. The security guard puffed his chest out again, encouraged by the stares. "See, now you're causing a scene. This is a private neighborhood, and trespassing isn't tolerated here. I'm giving you one last chance. Turn that car around." Finally, Samuel leaned forward, resting both hands on the steering wheel, his voice steady, low, and dangerous. "Son," he said, the single word carrying the weight of command, Do you have any idea who you're talking to? The guard smirked. Doesn't matter. Rules are rules. Can people like you? He stopped short, catching himself. Okay. But the words hung in the air like poison. People like you, Maya gasped, eyes darting between Samuel and the guard. Did he just? Yes, he did, Samuel said, his voice sharper now. His calm veneer cracked just enough for the audience watching to feel the shift in power. Now, you're going to wish you hadn't. The guard reached for his radio. Spatch, I've got it. Before he could finish, Samuel stepped out of the car. The door shut with a soft thunk, and suddenly the atmosphere shifted again. Samuel wasn't just a man in a car anymore, standing tall in his tailored charcoal suit with an aura of quiet authority. He looked like someone who commanded empires. The guard's words faltered. His bravado shrank. You're trespassing, he stammered. You can't enough. Samuel cut him off. He walked slowly toward the gate, his polished shoes clicking against the stone driveway. Every step radiated the kind of presence that comes from years of leading boardrooms, closing billion-dollar deals, and commanding respect without asking for it. By now, the neighbors had stopped pretending to jog. Phones were out. The delivery driver had parked completely. This wasn't just an argument anymore, which a spectacle. Samuel stopped right in front of the guard. It's close enough that the younger man had to tilt his head back slightly to meet his gaze. You're standing in front of my home, Samuel said, pointing calmly at the sprawling mansion just beyond the gate. Its lights glowed against the evening sky like a beacon, the marble driveway stretching invitingly toward the grand entry. That house, that property, that land, it's mine. Built with my money, registered in my name, protected under my company's security contract, and yet here you are, blocking me. The guard's jaw tightened, but he was still clinging to scraps of defiance. You expect me to just believe that? No, Samuel said with a cold smile. I expect you to regret not believing it. The gate's intercom crackled to life suddenly, a voice coming from the control panel. Mr. Price, is everything all right out there? Maya's head snapped toward the panel. They know your name, she whispered. They know you live here. The guard froze, his face drained of color. Mr. Price, the intercom repeated. Samuel turned his head slightly, eyes still locked on the guard. Everything is not all right, he said, his voice deliberately loud enough for the microphone to pick up. Your employee here seems to think he owns the gate more than I do. There was a pause. Then the intercom voice stammered. Yes, sir. My apologies. I'll get the supervisor immediately. The guard's bravado evaporated entirely. He stepped back, fumbling for words. I was just following procedure. Procedure, Samuel echoed, his tone dripping with disdain. Let me tell you what procedure looks like. You identify the resident. You check your records. You respect the person who pays your salary. Instead, you chose to humiliate me in front of my own home. The crowd beyond the road murmured. Some were shaking their heads. Others were filming outright. And Samuel knew, in that moment, he had the guard exactly where he wanted him. He leaned in, his voice low enough that only the guard could hear. You have 30 minutes left on this job. Use them wisely. T. Guard blinked. What do you mean? Samuel smirked. You'll find out. With that, Samuel walked back to his car, opened the door, and slid inside as calmly as he had stepped out. The Mercedes purred to life again, its headlights cutting through the dusk. The gate, finally recognizing its rightful owner, began to swing open. Slowly, majestically, the iron bars parted. The guard stood frozen, his hand still hovering over his useless radio as the black luxury car glided past him into the estate. But as the gates closed behind Samuel, the hook was set. The security team didn't know it yet, but they had just triggered a storm one that would cost them their jobs, their pride, and every ounce of false authority they thought they had. Because Samuel Price wasn't just a homeowner. He was the man who owned the contract, and when he was finished, there wouldn't be a single guard left standing at those gates. The early morning sun had long faded into a blazing noon, but at the wrought iron gates of Alexander Cole's mansion, the tension only burned hotter. The murmurs of security radios, the shifting of boots against the asphalt, and the glaring stares of the guards formed an invisible barrier more menacing than the steel gate itself. Alexander, dressed in his tailored charcoal gray suit, stood tall, though his jaw tightened with every passing second. He was a man used to commanding respect. Boardrooms fell silent when he entered. Entire corporations waited for his word, yet here, on the threshold of his own empire, he was being treated like an intruder. The lead guard, a broad-shouldered man with a square jaw and mirrored sunglasses that reflected Alexander's own determined face back at him, crossed his arms. "Sir, I'll repeat this one more time. If you don't have clearance to enter, step back until proper authorization is confirmed." Alexander's lips pressed into a thin line. The way the guard said "sir" wasn't respect, it was mockery, laced with dismissal. He wasn't asking, he was commanding. "This is my property," Alexander said, his voice low but edged with steel. "My name is Alexander Cole. You've seen me here before. I built this place from the ground up, and I will not ask again up in my gate." "What?" But instead of compliance, the guard tilted his head and smirked. "We get all kinds of stories, Mr. Cole, was it? You'd be surprised how many people claim to own mansions around here." He gestured to his team with a flick of his hand. Subtle but clear. "Stand firm. No entry." Behind him, two younger guards shifted uneasily. They weren't as hardened as their leader, and their darting eyes betrayed discomfort. Tay knew who Alexander was. Everyone in the city did. His face was on magazine covers, his name on skyscrapers. His influence spread through industries like veins of gold in rock. Yet they remained frozen, caught between fear of their superior and fear of the man who held more power than all of them combined. For Alexander, the humiliation was heavier than the heat beating down on his shoulders. He had fought through racism in boardrooms, dismissal from investors, and skepticism at every stage of his career. He had torn down barriers that were centuries old, but never, not once, had he been blocked from his own home, as though he were trespassing on soil his money and blood had earned. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Without breaking eye contact with the guard, he slid it out and answered. "Sir." It was Elijah, his chief of staff, his voice tight with urgency. "We got word about the disturbance." "You want me to send the house staff out too?" "No?" Alexander's tone was clipped, sharp. "Not yet. I want to see just how far this goes," because Alexander already knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a simple clerical error or a gate malfunction. This was deliberate. Someone had given orders, and Alexander intended to find out who. He ended the call and slid the phone back into his pocket. Slowly, deliberately, he took a step closer to the gate. Close enough that the sunlight glinted off the polished steel bars separating him from his own driveway. "You think you're doing your job?" Alexander asked, his voice calm now, almost a calm. "Let me educate you. My job built yours. My money pays for those radios you're holding, for the boots you're standing in, for the food you'll eat tonight. And right now, you are one step away from making the worst mistake of your life." The guard stiffened, but didn't move. "Are you threatening me?" Alexander's laugh was short, humorless. "No, I don't need to threaten, I promise." The moment stretched tense, electric, before the sound of tires crunching gravel broke the silence. A black SUV approached, sleek and menacing, its tinted windows reflecting the midday sun like obsidian. It rolled to a slow stop just behind the guards, and when the door opened, the air seemed to thicken with new weight. Out stepped Richard Hale, the head of the private security firm contracted for Alexander's estate. Tall, lean, and dressed in a perfectly pressed navy suit, Richard's very presence was a performance. His smile was tight, corporate, and cold. Alexander, Richard greeted smoothly, as though they were old friends crossing paths at a gala. "What seems to be the issue here?" "The issue," Alexander said evenly, "is that your men have forgotten who they're guarding. They've blocked me at my own gate." Richard's smile never wavered. If anything, it deepened though. His eyes remained flat. "Ah, I see. Yes, I received word about the incident. Unfortunately, our system flagged an alert. New protocols were issued last week. May not have been informed. Strict verification measures are now required for all entries." "All entries." Alexander's tone hardened, including the owner. "Especially the owner," Richard replied smoothly, as though he'd rehearsed it. "High-profile figures, such as yourself, are often the subject of impersonation attempts. We're simply ensuring your safety." Alexander stared at him. The excuse was polished. Yes, but it was a lie. He could smell it. "Then verify me," Alexander challenged. "Run your checks, call your system, kill whatever you need to do, but open my gate." Keats, Richard's eyes flickered for the briefest second hesitation. Then he smiled again. "Unfortunately, until the verification clears, my men cannot permit entry. Rules are rules. Surely a man like you, who built his fortune on structure and order, can respect that." The words weren't just patronizing. They were laced with poison, with deliberate disrespect that simmered beneath the polite veneer. And Alexander understood. This wasn't about safety. This was about control. Someone wanted to remind him that power wasn't always in the boardroom, that, even at his own front gate, he could be made to wait, made to feel small, made to taste the bitterness of being told no. But Alexander Cole had built his empire by taking no, hey, and grinding it into dust. His hand tightened into a fist at his side, but his face remained calm, unreadable. "You have exactly 1 hour," he said quietly, but every word carried the weight of iron. 1 hour to resolve this. After that, we'll see who holds the real power here." Richard's smile faltered, just barely, but he inclined his head. "As you wish." As Alexander turned and walked back toward his sleek black Bentley parked just beyond the road, the guards shifted uneasily again. The storm was coming. They could feel it, and when it broke, it wouldn't be forgiving. Inside the car, Alexander closed the door with deliberate calmness. He leaned back against the leather seat, exhaling slowly. His phone buzzed again this time. A different name lit the screen. Camille, his wife. He hesitated, then answered. "Alex." Her voice was calm but concerned. "The staff told me what's happening outside. What are you going to do?" Alexander's gaze drifted back to the gates, to the men standing there, oblivious to the tidal wave about to sweep them away. "I'm going to remind them," he said softly, "whose house this really is." The call ended. The Bentley's engine hummed to life. And as Alexander steered the car into a slow turn, his mind was already racing, not with anger, but with calculation. Someone wanted a power struggle. They were about to get one, and Alexander Cole never lost. As the Bentley disappeared down the street, the guards exchanged uneasy glances, unaware that in less than an hour their world would be turned upside down, because Alexander wasn't just coming back. He was coming back with the kind of power that didn't knock politely on gates. It broke them down. The following morning, the mansion grounds seemed peaceful, almost deceptively so. The sun rose gently over the horizon, spilling golden light across the sprawling driveway, the perfectly trimmed hedges. in the iron gates that had become the stage for last night's humiliating confrontation. But beneath that golden glow, storm was brewing, one that was about to tear through every layer of pretense the security team had been hiding behind. Malik entered his study early, dressed in a charcoal suit, his face carved into determination. He wasn't just a man wronged anymore. He was a CEO who had been publicly disrespected at the threshold of his own home, and every fiber of his being was demanding action. The words from last night still echoed in his mind. "This property isn't for you. We'll need to check with the real owner." That phrase, delivered with smugness, had burned into his memory like a brand. It wasn't just disrespect. It was a statement, dripping with prejudice and arrogance. Malik knew this wasn't just about a gate mix-up or a lazy security team failing to recognize his face. This was deeper, uglier, and more corrosive. And as he poured his coffee and opened his laptop, his plan began to crystallize. The first order of business was documentation. Malik believed in power, backed by evidence. He ordered the full footage from the estate's CCTV cameras. His IT manager forwarded the files within the hour, and as he clicked play, the incident replayed in stark clarity. There he was standing outside the gate, calm at first, then visibly frustrated, then finally exasperated as the guards exchanged smug looks and deliberately stalled his entry. The cameras captured everything: the sneers, the whispered exchanges, the blatant refusal to open the gate despite Malik's repeated presentation of his key fob and identification. What sealed it all was the audio from one of the boom mics installed near the gate. Malik heard it again, one of the guards muttering under his breath, "He doesn't fit in here." The moment Malik heard that, his jaw tightened, his hand clenched into a fist on the desk. This wasn't just negligence. This was bias, naked and unashamed, festering inside the very team he had entrusted with his safety and privacy. But Malik wasn't the type to explode blindly. His revenge would be deliberate, calculated, and impossible to challenge. Later that morning, Malik convened a private meeting with his most trusted advisors, his legal counsel, his estate manager, and his coup from the company headquarters. The three sat around his long oak conference table, the mood somber yet charged. "Gentlemen," Malik began, his voice steady, "last night wasn't an inconvenience. It was an insult, one that cuts to the core of who I am and what I stand for. The security firm believes I can be treated like a trespasser in my own home. They believe I don't belong here. And if they believe that, then they don't belong here either." His coup leaned forward. "What's your move, sir?" Malik tapped the laptop, replaying the incriminating audio for them. The words hung in the air like a toxin. His legal counsel shook his head slowly, disgust on his face. "This is grounds for immediate breach of contract," the lawyer said. "Dereliction of duty, negligence, and now we can add discriminatory behavior. You could sue them for millions if you wanted to." Malik gave a cold smile. "I don't need the money. I need the message sent, loud and clear." The estate manager, a man who had been with Malik for over a decade, nodded. "You want them gone?" "Not just gone," Malik said, his voice dropping to a steely whisper. "I want them to walk out of here knowing exactly why. I want them to feel the humiliation I felt standing outside my own gate like an intruder. And I want the neighborhood, the community, and this entire firm to know when you disrespect me, you don't just lose a client. You lose everything." The coup chuckled darkly. "This is going to be one for the history books." Plans were drawn. Malik instructed his legal team to draft immediate termination papers. Not a warning, not a suspension. An outright dismissal for cause. And then, with a strategist's precision, he laid out the scene he wanted. The entire team summoned, the footage played, and the firings delivered in public, with no room for excuses or denial. The following evening, the mansion's great hall was transformed into a stage. Malik sat at the head of a long, polished table, flanked by his advisors. Behind him, a massive projection screen glowed with the paused footage from the security cameras. The guards shuffled in one by one, clearly confused. Their expressions ranged from annoyance to mild nervousness, but none of them knew exactly what was about to happen. Malik didn't greet them. He didn't offer them water or pleasantries. Instead, he pressed play. The video rolled. The guards' smirks from the night before filled the screen. Their arrogant body language was undeniable, their whispered words amplified for all to hear. The room was silent, except for the playbacks, except for the guards, shifting uncomfortably in their seats as they watched themselves cross every line of professionalism and decency. When the video ended, Malik rose to his feet. His presence filled the room, his voice sharp as glass. "Do you know what I see when I watch this footage?" he asked, pacing slowly. "I see men entrusted with my safety, entrusted with the privacy of my home, treating me like a stranger, treating me like I don't belong, laughing in my face, whispering about me like I'm an outsider at my own gate. And the worst part, you weren't even embarrassed to say it out loud. You believed I was powerless to hold you accountable. You believed I'd just let it go." No one spoke. A few shifted in their chairs, trying to avoid his gaze. "You failed at the one job you had," Malik continued. "But this isn't just about failure, okay? This is about arrogance, prejudice, disrespect. And for that, I have only one response." He signaled to his legal counsel, who slid thick folders across the table toward each guard. "Effective immediately," Malik declared, his voice carrying finality. "You are all terminated. Your badges are revoked. Your authority here is over, and you will leave this property tonight." The guards' faces flushed red, their mouths opening in protest, but Malik cut them off with a raised hand. "Save it. Your excuses mean nothing. The evidence speaks louder than you ever could. You thought you were above consequences. Now you learn otherwise." The estate manager stood at the side, a silent enforcer, ready to escort them out. But Malik wasn't finished. "As of tomorrow," he said, "your firm will receive notice of breach of contract. I will see to it personally that your names are tied to this disgrace. You will not just lose this contract, you will carry this stain on your careers forever. And let this moment remind you, you may have thought I was powerless standing outside that gate. But I am the one who controls this house, this contract, and your future." The silence that followed was suffocating. The guards looked down at the table, shame washing over their faces. The smirks were gone. The arrogance had evaporated. All that remained was the crushing weight of humiliation. One of them, the one who had muttered the words, finally broke. "We didn't mean don't," Malik snapped, his voice low and dangerous. "Don't insult me further with lies." The man shut his mouth, his face pale. The guards were escorted out, their footsteps echoing through the marble halls. Outside, neighbors peeked from their windows, whispering as they saw the once cocky security team packing up their gear and leaving the estate under escort. Malik stood at his window, watching it all unfold. For the first time since the incident, he felt the scales tip back toward balance. Justice wasn't complete yet, but it was in motion, and as he closed the curtains, a thought burned in his mind. This was just the beginning. The guards were pawns. The real battle was with the firm that had placed them here, the firm that thought they could disrespect a man like him without consequences. The storm wasn't over. It was only just beginning, and Malik was about to unleash it. The mansion was silent after the last of the security team was escorted out. The heavy iron gates, once a symbol of prestige and protection, now stood as hollow reminders of betrayal. Daniel moved slowly back inside, his polished shoes echoing against the marble floor. Every step carried both the weight of disappointment and the thrill of what was about to unfold. This wasn't going to be just a simple firing. No, Daniel had something much larger in store, something that would reverberate far beyond his mansion walls. The next morning, Daniel stood at the top floor of his home office, staring out the wide window that overlooked the front gate. For the first time in years, the view felt tainted. He could still see last night's scene in his mind, his own employees questioning his right to enter his own property. Their tone laced with suspicion that had nothing to do with protocol and everything to do with prejudice. That thought lingered. It wasn't just incompetence. It wasn't just arrogance. It was systemic. They saw him not as the CEO who signed their paychecks, not as the owner of this multi-million-dollar estate, but as someone who didn't belong. Daniel clenched his jaw. He'd spent decades breaking down barriers, proving himself in boardrooms filled with doubt. But here, his own gate, he had been reduced to a stranger, a suspect in his own life. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he rarely used, except for serious matters. On the other end, a voice answered with calm professionalism. "Yes, Mr. Carter." "Pulled the files," Daniel said firmly. "I want a full background check on every member of last night's security team. And I don't mean the basic checks. I want everything: employment history, disciplinary records, lawsuits, anything that touches their past." The voice replied without hesitation. "Understood. I'll have it for you within the hour." Daniel set the phone down and allowed himself a tight smile. This wasn't going to be an emotional reaction. No, he would turn their arrogance into evidence, their ignorance into a career-ending mistake. By mid-morning, a thick file sat on his desk, bound in sleek leather. Daniel flipped it open. Each profile stared back at him: names, dates, records. And as he read, his frown deepened. It wasn't just last night. This wasn't a one-off mistake. Multiple incidents dotted the pages: confrontations with delivery drivers, complaints filed by visitors, even recorded footage of one guard mocking a neighbor's landscaper. A pattern was emerging, ugly and undeniable. These men hadn't just embarrassed Daniel. They had been poisoning the community with their behavior for months. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his fingers pressed together. He knew what had to come next. Later that afternoon, he called his attorney, a sharp-minded woman named Vanessa, who had stood by him through corporate battles that toppled competitors twice his size. She arrived at the mansion within the hour. Key, her presence commanding. They crossed the line, Daniel began as he handed her the file. And not just last night. They'd been doing this repeatedly. This wasn't incompetence. It was discrimination. They thought they could get away with it because people like me don't usually fight back. Well, they chose the wrong man. Vanessa's eyes scanned the pages, her brow tightening with every flip. Finally, she closed the file and looked up. "Okay, this is solid. We can press charges, file complaints with their agency, and bring this to the media if you want. It won't just end their contracts, could end their careers." Daniel's lips curved into something between satisfaction and resolve. "Good, but I don't just want them fired. I want them to understand the cost of what they did. I want them to remember this every time they think about disrespecting someone because of who they are." Vanessa nodded slowly. "Then we'll make this public. Controlled, strategic, but public. You've built your name on integrity. This will only strengthen it." By the next morning, the gears of revenge were in full motion. A private press conference was called at the estate. Journalists gathered under the sweeping archways of Daniel's driveway, cameras clicking as the story began to unravel. Daniel stood tall before the microphones, not in anger, but in calm authority. "Last night," he began, his voice steady, "I was denied entry to my own home by a security team I hired and paid. They questioned my right to be here, not because of security protocols, but because of prejudice. I've uncovered a long record of similar incidents tied to this team, and today I'm making sure that behavior ends not just for me, but for anyone who has ever been treated like they don't belong in their own community. The crowd erupted with questions, flashes of cameras lighting up the moment. Daniel answered each one with composure, weaving the narrative not just of personal betrayal, but of systemic accountability. Within hours, the story exploded across social media and national news outlets. Headlines blared. Black CEO denied access to his own mansion by security team, fights back with evidence. Public opinion turned swiftly and sharply. Comment sections filled with outrage. Imagine working for a man and blocking him from his own property. Skew, one tweet read. Another wrote, "This is why we still need voices like his. Respect to Daniel Carter." And while the world reacted, the former security team members faced the consequences. Their agency suspended them immediately pending investigation, and by week's end, their contracts were terminated. Some even found their names blacklisted from future private security work. But Daniel wasn't done. 3 nights later, he hosted an exclusive dinner at the mansion, inviting community leaders, executives, and neighbors. The gates, once a point of conflict, opened smoothly for each guest. Now manned by a brand new team of security professionals Daniel had personally vetted. These men and women greeted every arrival with respect and professionalism and intentional. Visible contrast to the disgrace of the past. When the dinner began, Daniel stood once more, raising his glass. "Tonight isn't just about what happened to me," he told the gathered crowd. "It's about making sure no one else faces the same. The gates to this home will never again be a barrier of prejudice. They will be a symbol of protection and welcome for all." The guests applauded, some standing in admiration. The mansion, once stained by that humiliating night, had been reclaimed, transformed into a place of triumph. Yet, as the evening wound down and Daniel retreated to his private study, he couldn't help but think about the irony. They had tried to keep him out of his own home, and in doing so, they had destroyed their own careers. And the poetic part, he hadn't even had to raise his voice. He had simply let the truth and the world do the work for him as he sipped his glass of wine. Daniel smiled quietly to himself. Revenge wasn't always about rage. Sometimes it was about exposure. Sometimes the best revenge was letting your enemies choke on the weight of their own mistakes. And yet, as the clock ticked past midnight, a question lingered in the air. Subtle but undeniable. Had this victory truly closed the chapter? Or had it only set the stage for something even bigger? Something that would test not just Daniel's resilience, but his very vision of justice. The thought was left unresolved, a cliffhanger hanging heavy in the night. Because when the gates of power are tested, the fight is never truly over. The neighborhood was never the same again. For weeks, people whispered about the night the black CEO had returned home, been blocked at his own mansion gate, and turned the tables on the very men who thought they could dictate his worth. The firing of the entire security team was only the beginning. What followed was a cascade of events that revealed just how deep the arrogance and prejudice had run, and how poetic justice could cut through it like a blade. Word spread quickly, not just in his exclusive gated community, but across the city. People talked about the CEO who humbled the guards. Some twisted the story, making it sound like a rich man's tantrum. Others told it as a legend of poetic justice, where a man, tired of being doubted, turned the humiliation into empowerment. But those closest to him knew the truth. It wasn't about wealth or pride or ego. It was about dignity. The following morning, news vans lined up outside the community gates. Journalists sniffed out the story after someone leaked footage from a resident's doorbell camera, capturing the confrontation. The clip went viral within hours, showing the black CEO being told, "You don't belong here," at the gates of the mansion he had built. It didn't take long for hashtags to erupt online. Hashtag OwnGateCEO, hashtag UDONT, belong here, hashtag justice at the mansion. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Millions shared the video, adding captions like, "Imagine building your empire," only to be told you don't deserve to live in it. But the CEO didn't stop at firing the guards. He launched a full investigation into the private security firm that managed the neighborhood. The results were damning. Discriminatory complaints, cover-ups, and even cases where residents of color had been harassed or delayed at the gate. The guards weren't just doing their jobs. They were carrying out a quiet, spoken policy of exclusion. When the findings went public, the entire security company collapsed. Lawsuits piled up. Homeowners began scrambling to distance themselves from the firm. And yet, while others played defense, the CEO was already 2 steps ahead. Instead of letting the scandal rot in negativity, he transformed it into something bigger. He announced the creation of a new security service, one owned by him, one that would be trained not only in protection, but also in equity, respect, and professionalism. His company's slogan, "Every home deserves protection, every resident deserves respect." The same community that once questioned his right to live there now had no choice but to hire his firm. The ultimate irony. His new company won the contract to secure the very gates that had once been slammed shut in his face. Residents who had stood silently during the confrontation now lined up to shake his hand. Some were sincerely embarrassed by their silence that night. Others were opportunistic, eager to be on the winning side. He smiled politely, but he never forgot the way people had looked at him that evening, as if he were trespassing on his own land. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind his mansion, he stood at the gates with his daughter. She had been watching everything unfold, her young eyes absorbing lessons she'd never forget. "Daddy?" she asked softly. "Why did they think you didn't live here?" He crouched to meet her eyes, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes, baby, people can't see past what they've already decided about you. They look at you and think they know your story. Yeah. But here's the truth. Your story belongs to you. No one else gets to write it." Bacardi, her little face hardened with determination, mirroring the fire in his own. "So, we write our own story." "Exactly," he said, lifting her up so she could see the gates in their full towering height. "And when someone tries to shut the door on us, we build a new door." The irony of it all hit him then. The same gate meant to keep him out now stood as a symbol of everything he had overcome. Every car that passed through, every resident that swiped their access card, did so under the watchful eye of the company he had built in the ashes of their prejudice. But the story didn't end at the neighborhood. His viral moment became a global conversation. Universities invited him to speak on leadership, resilience, and dignity. Corporations studied his response as a masterclass in turning humiliation into power. What once felt like an attack on his identity had become a platform for change. And yet, in private moments, he reminded himself of something even more important. It wasn't just about him. It was about his daughter. About every kid who would grow up facing closed doors and doubters. About proving that when someone tries to strip you of your dignity, the greatest revenge isn't anger, it's ownership. Weeks later, the very last piece of irony fell into place. The ousted security chief, the man who had ordered his guards to stop the CEO, showed up at his office, resume in hand, desperate, jobless, humbled. The CEO didn't gloat. He didn't shout. He didn't slam the door. Instead, he simply looked at the man and said, "This is the difference between us. You tried to block me out of my own home, but me, I'll never block someone from feeding their family. You're hired, but under one condition. You treat every resident, every worker, every person with the respect you denied me." The man nodded, shame burning in his face. The CEO smiled faintly and ended the meeting with the same words he had spoken that night at the gate. "This is my house, my gate, my rules." But this time, those words weren't just about a mansion. They were about legacy. about rewriting the rules of power, respect, and dignity, not for himself alone, but for everyone watching. And with that, the black CEO didn't just fire the guards at his gate. He fired a shot heard around the world.